about continuing and talking about sessions, let's talk about this article courtesy of Mixmag regarding, is the Sesh starting to catch up with millennials? It says, is the Sesh starting to catch up with millennials? This is an interesting article, something that touches me a little bit, and I thought I would comment on it, especially considering that I've kind of had an interesting evolution when it comes to getting on it and being on the session stuff. And over the last few years, I've kind of realized actually that I actually legitimately enjoy going out and raving for the raving sake, for the sake of hearing new music, watching DJs perform, talking to strangers in the smoking area, and just hanging out, more so than I enjoy getting on it. I think in the past, especially when I lived at home, I found raving an escape from the banality of my everyday life, or sometimes, especially when I was kind of, rebelling and going through my little angsty stage living at home, I found going out an escape from like the tyranny of my parents' kind of fucking authority and shit and rule, and sometimes them not letting me get out. But then as soon as I moved out, it's weird actually, when I was at home I was going out way more often, I was getting on it way more, but then as soon as I moved out, it hasn't really been the same thing. I haven't really kept up with going out as much as I did before in the past, and I've gone out sober way more than I ever did when I was at home. That's the thing. I've gone out and had amazing times, 2 raves, had a good time, stayed out the whole night without doing a lick of anything, not even a drop of alcohol, while I've been living at home. And I think that has to do with my changing attitude towards a rave, and also not really seeing raves as an excuse to get fucked up, and mostly seeing it as a way to obviously enjoy the music that I love, see DJs that I love, and just be around people that love the same thing as well. That kind of collective sort of like thing, ambience is fucking amazing. That's actually one of the reasons why I love berghain, I'm not gonna lie. It's like this idea that you all really care about this club as much as each other. You're all equally as obsessed. You're all fucking turbo dorks and nerds when it comes to this level of music, or this comes to that version of music, that genre of music, that style of music, that nightlife scene, whatever, and you're all celebrating it together regardless of where you're from, color, race, creed, religion, but I also know, especially in England, we have a really hard time with moderation. Us Brits, us English people, us Londoners specifically, we have a very hard time when it comes to moderation. We don't do moderation well at all whatsoever. It's really, 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 really bad. People can't seem to just do a little bit. People can't seem to do stuff on the weekends. People can't do stuff in some settled balance. It's always all on or all off, which is really bad, because when it's all on, it's all on. So this article, I think, will be illuminating on that. So let's go on. This is courtesy of Mixmag. It's written by a writer called David Hillier. It says as follows: shall we buy another bag? For the Sesh habitué, this question typically posed somewhere on the premium between the pub and bar club closing. The sunrise is a well-worn trope. That cocaine ordered now will be laced with leverscone, a canine worming treatment, or benzocaine, is a mere triviality in the early morning's dopamine fiend, because the spirit of the sesh is one of endurance, fueled not just by coke but alcohol, ketamine, methadone, 2C, CK, psychedelics, literally anything with ramifications for health be damned. But is the sesh starting to have a deeper toll? Beyond that of maxed out overdrafts, existentially challenging Tuesdays, and first terms with your local delivery drivers. England and Wales' recent annual drug statistics revealed a record increase in deaths related to drug poisoning to 5,448 people. 47 of those involved in opiates, but most eye-catching were the cocaine deaths. They spiked by 30.5% in 1 year to 1,118, nearly 10 times that of 2011. The biggest cohort of these now was the 30 to 39 year olds, who suffered 335 fatalities. That is wild. I did not know it was that bad. People are dropping like flies courtesy of the sesh. That is a little bit too much, bro. Jesus Christmas. I think that story of what's her name, Kate Quigley, because I heard actually from people, allegedly, the comedian Kate Quigley was involved in a really tragic situation. I think it was during the pandemic, where she went out. No, I think it was after a club night or something. They went to an Airbnb. and Quake Quigley, the stand-up comedian, and her friends ordered some coke, and they were doing lines in the Airbnb, and unfortunately the coke was laced with fentanyl, and they got super high and they passed out. And when Kate Quigley woke up, all her friends were dead. Like, if I'm not mistaken, I think all her friends were dead, everyone. So I think it was like 3 guys and 1 girl, and she's the only one that survived. So I think if that sort of thing happens, I don't know, that's the kind of thing that would make you want to quit everything. That's the kind of thing that make you want to go completely sober. But I have heard from some people, allegedly, that she still gets on it. So that didn't stop her. You know, imagine waking up and seeing all your friends dead and it still doesn't stop you from doing drugs. I don't know. Maybe there's no saving you. Maybe you don't want to be saved. Maybe that's the reason. Who knows? Numbers of people accessing treatments services for powder cocaine also rose by 10% from 2022 to 2023. Plus, there's near record alcohol-related liver diseases deaths in over 35s, and 2023 also recorded the 3rd highest statistics for MDA-related deaths, nearly half of which were 30-year-olds and over. So, how did we get here? And in an era where Generation Z are embracing sober curiosity and doing less cocaine, and most recent drugs use stats showing that 25% reduction in most 16 to 24-year-olds across a single year, how did the nation's cess perennials evolve towards a healthier future? I don't think that's true. I don't think it's true that Gen Zs aren't doing as much drugs. I think the ones that are reported, like, you have to imagine, you have to be a certain level of a dork to even respond to these sort of like reports, you know, votes, polls, wherever they may be. Most people who are actually outside aren't going to respond to these polls. But I've been out enough times to know that the Gen Z kids that I see in clubs, they're fucked. Like, they are super fucked. And if anything, they're way more fucked because they're doing a lot more shit super early, because a lot of them sort of skipped a lot of years of development because of COVID, right? A lot of them maybe missed out on actually going to a university campus. Most of them missed out on going to college and moving away. They had to kind of grow up in this weird bubble, COVID bubble. So there's some of them are a little bit immature, or some of them are trying to play catch up. So they end up doing way too much, and they end up looking way more haggard and older than they actually are, which is a shame, really, considering how young they are. But I do think the whole idea that, you know, Generation Z kids are doing way less drugs and millennials are doing all the drugs is not true. I think everybody that's still out now, because what I think happened as well in COVID, everybody that was like over going out and thought it wasn't that important anymore just moved on and did other things. Whoever's left behind now is just still holding it down. It's still getting on it. Simple as that. Those are the ones who are still holding everything down. And they're doing all the drugs, they're doing all the booze, they're doing everything under the sun. I don't think one generation is worse than others. I think everybody's just as bad as each other. I think it continues. Numbers of people accessing treatment. So how did we get here? And in the era I've read that already. Let's scroll down. The British disease. Okay, hopefully this talks about the inability of us to have any sort of balance and control. So the Sesh entered the vernacular in 2015 via a Facebook named Humans of the Sesh. Really? Its admins using monikers like Brown Sauce and Grand Fiend posted memes venerating a lifestyle of late nights and longer mornings, which only ended with the last wrap has been licked clean. By the way, I never understood people who do that, who lick the baggies and stuff. Like, that's a bit gross. You don't need to do that sort of stuff, to be fair, but hey, if you want to lick stuff, go ahead and lick it. A Vice article published in the following year declared that 2016, our common new annus horribilis, incorporating Brexit, Trump's first election, and the roll call for heroes' deaths from David Bowie to Prince to murdered MP Joe Cox, was the year of the Sesh. The writer Angus Harrison makes a link between these short-term triggers and a broader austerity-led atrophying of culture and opportunity for the Sesh's rise to prominence. Let's read that one more time. The writer Angus Harrison makes a link between the short-term triggers and the broader austerity-led atrophying of culture and opportunity for the Sesh's rise to prominence. The Sesh is basically club culture with older culture a bit sucked out, writes Harrison, going on to posit that 2016 wasn't the year we got angry, it was the year we gave up. As such, the Sesh, the mimification of nihilism, was a perfect response. To be honest, that's what I've experienced when I went to Berghain. The last times I've been to Berghain, I felt like there's been more people in there just getting on it, using it as an excuse to get as fucked up as possible. Honestly, it's been probably the closest, the most, this recent times I've been have been the most similar berghain's been to like a London night out. I've seen more people super fucked, like, you know, falling on the floor, getting carried by their friends, looking completely monged out, than I have ever done in the past. And usually when you went in the past, you'd see a lot of like people, you know, standing on the sides and you know, listening to the music, talking amongst each other, just chilling, smoking a cigarette, looking chill. But the times I've gone recently, people have really gone for it. So I think the Sesh is really back in full effect, if anything. Especially amongst the GHB users. Anyone in Berlin can definitely attest to that. Humans of the Sesh was a progenitor for the flurry of platform spanning Sesh meme accounts, of which the still active Ketflix and Pills became the exemplar of. 2016 marked a momentous moment for UK drug culture when The Loop, a harm reduction organization co-founded by criminologist and researcher Professor Fiona Measham, conducted the country's first ever drug checking services at the Secret Garden Party. Measham, who is the chair of the criminology at Liverpool, has been writing about UK drug culture since the early 1990s. For average British person in 1980s, the image of drug use meant heroin epidemic, which emerged largely thanks to the country shutting down of heavy industry and increased homelessness. These drug users also contaminated Drugs Association of heroin injecting the AIDS epidemic, says Measham. Then came 1988, Acid House and its psychoactive fire starter, MDMA or ecstasy. Taking drugs suddenly wasn't just about escaping an oblivion, it was about celebration and socializing. A few people fell by the wayside, but generally, most people had the time of their lives. The changing cultural perception of who a drug user might be has been extraordinary. Ecstasy became increasingly visible within popular culture throughout the 1990s, from Ebenezer Gold in the veiled references to taking pills to beloved club culture films like Human Traffic. Yet MDMA users' preference for water over booze posed an economical headache for the booming nighttime economy that was being used by Tony Blair's Labour as a driver of civic revival in towns that Thatcherite recession left to rot. You know what's funny though? I think I've seen way more people now drinking on stuff like MDMA and ecstasy than in the past. In the past, it was very common for people to sprinkle some of that shit into the bottle, especially if you got it in crystal form. But I've seen way more people now drinking or kind of sprinkling their gear into a bottle of beer, into a pint, into a mixer, not actually doing it with water, which is probably the best way to do it so you don't get super fucked up. But you know, people nowadays just want to get completely obliterated. To combat this, and with the media-led furor around Lee of Betts' 1995 ecstasy-related death still ringing in the ears of national worried parents, alcohol producers developed alcohol pops and alcohol-containing energy drinks. These, along with the doubling of the wine's consumption between 1980 and 2000, and the 2003 Licensing Act, which already dished out extended licensing hours to over 50,000 venues, helping make drinking spaces no longer a seminal perverse of the stellar swilling blokes. Coke's normalization occurred in lockstep. Use more than quadruple since Liam Gallagher sang about doing the White Line in Oasis's 1994 proto-sesh anthem Cigarettes and Alcohol. It reached record levels at the height of indie sleaze. That's a very good point. That indie sleaze era definitely was a time when people were getting on it a lot, when 6.5% of young people took a packet, and for a nation fizzling with a culture of extreme drinking, one that Tony Blair labeled the British disease, and still endures a 2023 research suggesting we're the third. Wow. 2023 research suggests the UK, where I live, Great Britain, is the third highest binge drinking nation across 33 countries. We are the third highest binge drinkers across 33 countries. God almighty. Cocaine helped maintain a perfect hedonistic Uberus. Yo, that is pretty scary, man. This tiny little island this tiny little island is somehow third when it comes to binge drinkers across 33 countries. Fuck me. The drugs stimulating properties sharpen up the soporific effects of GABA, the relaxing neurotransmitter released by booze, which keeping your neural pathways flooded with dopamine, a reward chemical that makes everything, whatever you say, hear, share, learn, even the one that what mate that's always talks to you about pyramids at 5 a.m. more meaningful. Misham suggests that some of the group have carried on with drinking and drug use, though it's not as often, and it's fair to speculate that these primo caners are the kind of people falling foul of their habits. Yeah, that's the thing I've noticed. I think since COVID ban, I think because COVID ban kind of changed everything, I think that people that I used to go out with now don't go out anymore. Like, especially from my circle of friends, I think there's probably only one person left that still goes out. Everyone else has kind of hung it up and just has got on to doing other things. Maybe they started a family, maybe they got a pet, maybe they went sober completely, maybe they moved away from London. A lot of people did that too, especially if they were from other parts of Europe when COVID was happening. Everyone wanted to be close to their family, so they moved back home to help. Maybe they moved back and started helping with the family business. Maybe they got a job. Maybe their lifestyle or demands change, because London also is a very expensive city and it's also not the greatest. There's not a lot of fun things to do. You have to pay for literally everything in this country. You can't even sit on a fucking bench for free. So maybe a lot of people just thought, you know what, I had my time, I had my sesh, I had my good times. I took part in indie sleaze. I took part in all these fucking times that were available when fucking Dawson was fucking popping, all this malarkey. Now I've had it. I want to move on and do other things. So those are the ones that leave. And I think they're a big chunk, which is why a lot of clubs are suffering probably when it comes to making money, when it comes to selling tickets, because those people, which I would love to call, it's for lack of a better term, they're like casuals. They go whenever they feel like it, but they're not like super committed to like getting on it. Those people are super integral to nightlife and clubs, I think. The regular schmegular people who kind of go out from time to time, they might go out to a club after a work night because they're still out at 10 p.m. Those really contribute to the overall, bottom line of most clubs. But now those people have gone. They've taken up running. They've taken up fucking Pilates. They've moved back home. They've got a dog. They've got a kid. They're married. Now you're seeing the difference in the club landscape. And the ones that are left in the club landscape, unfortunately, are the super, super pro caners. They're the ones that really enjoy it. They really fucking enjoy it. While newspaper reports of festival drug deaths tend to concern younger people overheating from MDMA, Misham tells Mixmag that it's not usual for a person dying at a festival dance tent at 4 a.m. to be a dad or older millennial. Wow, really? It's not unusual. Fucking hell. She says the Loop's annual survey shows that 1 in 6 festival takers only take drugs at festivals. Perhaps they're ravers or partygoers who become parents but leave their kid with their grandparents for an annual blowout. He'll take loads of pills and cocaine like he used to, but he's lost his tolerance and both drugs are much stronger now, so he has a heart attack. It's absolutely tragic. Yeah, that's something that I think has been also an effect of like the darknet markets and things like Telegram. Now people have access to like way stronger drugs, because I think in the past the drugs that were, especially in London, the drugs that you get here are just horrendous. By the time they come down here, they've been fucking bashed and mixed with loads of fucking horrible shit, which probably explains why people just stick to drinking and go crazy on the booze. But the stuff here isn't that great. But I think once darknet markets became popular, Tor, crypto, and now specifically with stuff like Telegram and shit, I think that opened the path and opened the doorway for people to get access to really good stuff, really high quality stuff. But unfortunately, the high quality stuff is super strong. And if you're used to having Bosch stuff and you have really high quality stuff, it can take a while to get used to it. But I can only imagine the people, because I think it happens to kids too. You hear about these kids dying in festivals, and most of it is because they take too much. They never slowly progress and take bit by bit. They always take too much. But you could also imagine when you're drunk and you're happy and you're having a good time, it's pretty much impossible for you to like moderate yourself or to dose yourself accordingly. You're just too wrapped up in the euphoria of your night out to really give a fuck about that sort of shit. But it do end up kicking you in the ass later on down the line, especially if you've taken. It's like going to a gym, I think. Like sometimes you go to a gym, you go every day, and then you miss 2 days, and when you go back, you feel as if like you missed like a week. So it must be the same with drugs. Like if you don't do it for a while, even if you just do it for the weekend only and you don't do it during the week, you can sometimes, lose your ability to tolerate all that sort of stuff, right? Your tolerance levels goes down, and then when you start taking a lot again, guess what? Boom, you're in trouble, and suddenly you're being fucking administered Narcan, and you're in the back of an ambulance somewhere. It can get very real very quickly. It continues. Heart of the matter. Misham tells Mixmag this couple of days before we speak to Harry. He's 36 and from Norwich, where he's first attended free parties when he was 16 years old, but came to Brighton for university. I started partying quite hard, he says, often taking cocaine a couple times a week with MDMA on an occasional rotation. That to me is too old. That to me is too much. I'm kind of thankful, and I'm very thankful that I had very conservative, very helicoptery, controlling, monitoring parents, because then I wasn't able to drink or do any drugs at home. So I only really could do it once I kind of had my own independence and kind of moved out, which was what, 22, 23-ish. Was had when I had my first kind of beer and stuff, which is highly embarrassing. But I think the good thing about that is that I can never really get super on it and be like a super like hard use of any multivitamins, because I started so late. And you know, now that I'm older, it's like, man, it's a bit lame. You know what I mean? I'm kind of over it. But I feel like surely if you started younger, you should have been over it far earlier. I feel like if you started drinking or doing drugs when you were 16, you know, you've probably seen and done it all. Like it really isn't, it shouldn't be that interesting to you past the age of maybe 24, 25. You've literally done it all, and there's, you know, you're not gonna see anything different. You might see different festivals, different club spaces, but essentially you've seen everything nightlife has to offer. So you're better off just like hanging it up. That's what I would have done anyway, especially if you start at 16. It continues. He worked in hospitality for 10 years. Oh, that's the worst combo, isn't it? Being actually into multivitamins, being into adult drugs and drinking, and then deciding to work in the hospitality industry, in bars and restaurants and clubs, where that sort of like culture is promoted, or it's a way of life. You know, you hear a lot about, or I've heard a lot about restaurant people being super into their fucking cocaine, being super into their drink. But you can also imagine with the pressures of their job, those type of things are sometimes a welcome remedy to kind of calm you down and get in an even kill. You know what I mean? So I get it, but it doesn't sound like a great idea. He worked in hospitality for 10 years in clubs and pubs, DJing for extra money, where drinking and drugs were the regular. It was so accessible. He tells Mixmag about working at one club. You were drinking on shift, doing a few bumps here and there, and it would shut at 4 a.m, but sometimes you wouldn't leave at 7 a.m. Then, you know, if somebody wants to carry on, you go back to theirs. Jesus Christ, bro. So you're working in a pub, you staying there until after hours, having a lock-in, and then when someone's gone after party, you go there too. That is too much, man. Underpinning everything beyond Brighton's transient population of students, stag do's and tourists and trust funders, fueling a motorcade of high all-night bash cocaine dealers, was Harry's hum of anxiety. So to loosen up, I'd have a few pints. Then before you know it, somebody arrives with a bag. Then the anxiety melts away and you chat all night, forgetting about everything until the next day anyway. Yo, using Class A drugs to deal with your anxiety sounds like a recipe for disaster, innit? Drinking a bunch and doing a bunch of hard Class A drugs to treat your anxiety sounds like such a bad idea. Things changed when his partner got pregnant and he didn't take any drugs for 2 years. After they separated, Harry took things quite hard and bought a bag of MDMA for last year's New Year's Eve. He was down on the drugs when he had one final line of his sofa at 6 a.m. He instantly knew something was drastically wrong. I couldn't breathe and it felt like 10-ton weight on my chest. It was so scary. He spent the next 4 days in hospital and is thankfully fine now, while avoiding Class A's like one night might be rabid, malevolent dog. Harry says that due to his being long-term damage, the doctors refer it to a cardiac event rather than a heart attack. Yo, he had a heart attack doing MDMA. He bought a bag of MDMA. He was down to do the bag to drugs when he had one final line on his sofa. He had a line of MDMA and had a heart attack. Shit. Rather than, sorry, the Harry, due to his being no long-term damage, the doctors refer to it as a cardiac event, quote unquote, rather than a heart attack. But basically, my heart stopped getting enough blood. I put it down to those years of booze and bag and sesh. Oh, okay. So he's relating it to that. All those years of damage finally came a knocking. Like it kind of, you know, all those years of abusing drugs finally bit him in the ass when he did that final quote unquote line of MDMA. Wow. Death data bag. Oh, death data dig. Death data bag. An anomaly of the deaths data is that it can't segregate powder cocaine from crack, but fatalities are rising in tandem with purity. UK's strength was 20% in 2009 and now it's 63% in 2018. The 2013 analysis aggregated drug checking services across EU countries that found that 75% of cocaine is now 7. Yeah, that's the thing. I think this is all because of the darknet and Telegram. I think this is the reason why the purity has gotten so much better over the years, especially in Europe. because I think before dealers could get away with selling selling Bosch stuff because you could, but now because everybody, you'd imagine road dealers are probably feeling a pinch. I'm sure some of them do sell online, but those that don't and prefer to do it hand to hand, door to door, they're probably feeling that a lot of their customers are disappearing because they prefer to just order the good stuff, even if it takes a couple of days to arrive, then to spend whatever much money it is to get stuff that's underweight and bashed to shit. But obviously, the purer it is, the more likely you are to go a bit too crazy on it. And if you haven't done it in a while, those type of things can take its toll on you. So I can definitely see how the deaths can spiral. Many dealers, especially those on Telegram, also now offer a near 100% option, and accessibility to cocaine has turbocharged, with most after party nitties in urban areas having 24/7 numbers and a partial symptom of Albanian OCGs, organized crime gangs led takeover of UK cocaine market around 2015. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, especially considering the area that I live in. The average ecstasy pill is now roughly double that of the 1990s, around 200 mg over circa 100 mg. Yeah, I've seen people doing 300, 350s in clubs. Crazy. With a regular presence of super strength pingers that can be 2 or 3 times the recommended adult dose, this unexpectedly and a variation of strength to add to the risk. While the stats do not demarcate between cocaine powder and crack, we can dig deeply to make some well-considered guesses about the profile of the fatalities. So Mixed Mag called Dr. Caroline Copland of the National Program of Substance Abuse from King's Cross to talk us through. First thing that to note is that there's a time lag with the statistics, and the numbers of deaths have increased as the data Caroline analysed. Caroline explains that crack users are more likely to die with other substances present like heroin, street benzodiazepines and cannabinoids, and also by using dependently. The main thing she points towards is that 502 people dying from cocaine and other drugs implicated, 34% are employed, 79.9% are male. Wow, really? So it's predominantly male doing this. Predominantly males who are dying. I guess the ladies are a lot more acute, a lot more sensible, a lot more responsible when it comes to drug taking. They take just a little bit, not too much, and then they go to sleep. But I guess the fellas are ramming those things in their faces until they're obliterated. Of the 246 people that died with only cocaine, 51% of them were employed, or 55% were employed, and 85% were male. We can infer that to these stats that the second cohort are more likely to be employed and less likely to be dependent, and possibly more likely to be recreational powder users. More eye-opening is the age of a person likely to die from solely cocaine versus other users of other drugs. This was 39.7 years old instead of 45 years old. Firstly, that's nearly 5.5 years of extra life, but it also suggests that people who are solely dying from cocaine use, who we know are more likely to be non-dependent recreational powder users, are dying younger within the millennial age bracket. That is wild, bro. Imagine working at a hospital and seeing people in their mid-30s to late 30s dying because of cocaine abuse or cocaine-related fucking deaths or like drug. It's like, what? And they look fairly well-to-do. They look like they have a job. They look responsible, but for some reason they just can't handle or keep control of those type of things. Imagine. So wild. Deadly Sesh staple. No one is taking. What's that? It's a quashed World Health Organization report from the 1990s found that occasional cocaine use does not typically lead to severe or even minor physical or social problems. Yeah, recent meta-review that analyzed over 170,000 deaths of people that had regularly or problematically used coke found that the elevated risk of death by suicide, homicide, or accidental injury and age-related fatalities. 2014 Spanish research also found that coke was associated significantly with an increased risk of sudden cardiovascular death for people aged 15 to 49. So there's only negatives really. The highs and the good things linked with drugs is really minute, innit? It sounds like the negatives far outweigh the positives, but it also sounds like the fatal effects of drugs don't happen instantly. It's like booze. You don't see how badly it's hurting or damaging you instantly. It happens slowly over time. Just look at Bert Kreischer's face. And the same thing goes for booze, or same thing goes for drugs and stuff. You never know until and even then you don't know. Fucking wild. So maybe it should be best for all of us, all of us adult age people to just fucking lay off everything. because nothing good can come from it really, unless you're really good at moderation and making sure that you do it sensibly. Yes, but I think everyone else should just probably lay it off completely and just go back to drinking water and chilling out and having salads and shit, because Jesus Christos. It continues. What the average users, whether getting it on once a year or month or a week, might not know about it is called cocaethylene. Cocaethylene, a substance that uniquely synthesizes when your body tries to metabolize cocaine in the presence of ethanol. People are more addicted to cocaethylene than they are to cocaine or alcohol, says Dr. Ryan Zafar, postdoctoral fellow at the Center of Psychedelic Research and Neuropharmacology at the Imperial College London. Fancy? Around 90% of cocaine users use it with alcohol. So when we talk about cocaine addiction, or when we talk about cocaine deaths, we may actually be seeing the impact of cocaethylene addiction on deaths. Interesting. Okay. Zafar points to the recent systemic review from Netherlands that found that 18 to 25-year-olds increased the chance of sudden death from cocaethylene exposure to cocaine alone, plus a greater chance of mitochondrial injury or cardiac arrest. Cocaethylene takes double the length of time to be metabolized in the body, so it has longer effects, says Dr. Zafar, adding that we had much more public health messaging about cocaethylene, emphasizing its many dangers. A quote here says it has an inhibiting effect on the cardiac of channels. If these shuts down, it could lead to a mitochondrial infraction, heart attack. Your liver, and kidneys also experience that. He calls it triple whammy. So yeah, man, it seems like there's no positives. There's no positives. Doing drugs in any way, shape, or form is gonna shorten your life, and it's just gonna fuck you up in the long term. Do you get me? You probably should just leave this whole thing alone, really. Let's do another one. Shall we buy a bag? In his book Psychonauts, drugs writer historian Mike J writes about Sigmund Freud's early puncture for cocaine, which resulted in 1884's Florida decomposed Uber Coca paper. J posits that Freud originally saw coke as a salver for a condition called neurasthenia, a relatively new disease of the nervous system brought on by what Jay calls the pace of life and the demands of business industry were pushing human machines beyond their limits. Imagine you suffer from neurasthenia or neurasthenia, and then you decide to self-medicate with fucking cocaine. Do you know how insane that is? Do you know how insane that is to self-medicate because you feel like you have some sort of nervous system issue and you self-medicate with cocaine? Sounds like a really bad idea, or a good idea depending on where you are. A personal view is that the Sesh, a particularly coke's place within its DNA, is a bit misunderstood. There's clearly a strata of oblivion seeking and trauma numbing, while supposed use by the boorish hooligan element is very edifying and definitely bad for the planet. But most users we know use the Sesh to temporarily find their own form of neurasthenic relief, while connecting with people in a way that they generally feel so conscious to do so. I don't think it's even that deep. It's just a fun way to extend the night and not go home. Because sessions or afters only really happen when you have a good night. I've not really been at shit raves and then somebody said, yeah, let's all go back to mine for like a session. It doesn't happen. It usually has to happen when the party or the rave is good and then you want to continue the party and someone suggests something and then you just fucking hop and skip over. That makes a lot more sense. I'm David Oz, but anyway, it continues. This feels especially true for men, particularly men. Particularly talking about a man in a divided, deprived country like Keep Calm and Carry On is literally the national anthem. So who don't have the natural cues and perhaps the communities to slow down. It then became a fiendish social crutch to unpick, largely due to Coke's skill at reorganizing your reward hierarchy, broadly meaning that anything that doesn't result in a massive dopamine dump becomes less interesting, so you just gravitate towards it seamlessly, especially after your rational decision-making brain has been impaired by 4 quick post-work pints. Jesus Christ, man. Jesus Christ. Honestly, I fucking love this stuff. I really do. It's so fascinating. But it doesn't have to be negative. The Sesh is a big part of British culture, yet it's still a taboo. It's got that shame attached to it. But we had such amazing time and it shaped who we are, says Laura from Crave the Rave. We spent so many times meeting weird and wonderful people in strange situations. It made us really open-minded, but there comes a time when you have to leave it, this piece of identity behind it. That's hard. That's the whole point, though. I think the shame of Seshes, or the shames of Asters, is more so the fact that you know you shouldn't be there. That's more the shame associated with it. Because there's a time when there's fun. There's a time when forest raves are fun. There's a time when all that shit's fun. Sharing fucking one baggie between 7 people is fun. But after a time, you just be like, you know what? I need to get my own multivitamins. I need to go to my own rave. I need to go out to my own places and just kind of see what's out there. So it's always fun, but I'm always also a big believer in like never being at a party too long. Something I've always kind of, stuck to, especially when it comes to house parties. I've always been, I think, a really good guest. I always know when to leave. I'd never overstay my welcome. And I think the same applies for like clubs or just being, a person. Just to make sure that you don't overstep or overstay your welcome and have people thinking, you know what, maybe they should ban everything, because you're so annoying. It continues. It's now almost cliche to say that the more well-being conscious and skint generation are drinking less. They are, but 60 to 24-year-old drug users have also nearly halved since 2001, with 30% being used in drugs in previous years. The most recent statistic had it down to 16.5, although ketamine users generally thriving increase of people reporting treatment in 2014. Self-awareness and self-presentation, it says here, on social media have led to the situation where young people don't want to be spangled all weekend and post it online. I think that's wrong. The young people that I follow, the ones that are on my Instagram, they are posting everything. I see people posting clips of themselves in fucking toilets doing stuff. You know what I mean? Like, they're out here. You just know where to look. She says, for Misha, who's continued to a recent report by the European Drug Agency, found an average time lag of 13 years from someone first using cocaine to a point of treatment. With the sky high purity of drugs, its societal ubiquity and availability, plus the increasing body of evidence pointing to its increasingly ruinous effects, the time to say no to a regular reload bag has all probability arrived for millennials, especially the older crew. Yeah, I think in general, for all people, this shouldn't apply for just millennials. This should apply for everybody. There should be an exit route. There should be an exit plan. You shouldn't want to be on it all the time, forever and ever. You should have an exit route. You should have a way to go out of it. Maybe it's to get involved in the behind the scenes. Maybe it's just to kind of switch and do other things. Maybe it's a case of finding other friends. But there has to be an exit plan. There has to be. You can't be doing the same things you were doing when you first got into a scene. And also, it's not as fun. Like, I think part of the reason why I have survived so long in the scene and why I feel like I enjoy my nights out is because I quickly realized, and I think it happened pretty quickly, maybe as soon as I started to DJ, that I really wasn't in it for what I thought I was in it for. At first I thought I was in it for just for the enjoyment and getting on it and getting fucking blitzed. And then as soon as I started to DJ and stuff, I started to really enjoy DJing. I started to really enjoy nightlife. I started to really enjoy randoms and dancing on the dance floor and kind of hanging out with bartenders who are working in a club that I'm fucking playing at, or whatever else, or just seeing the weird and wacky people that come into clubs and shit. All that stuff was fun to me. But I guess if that isn't fun to you and you enjoy the sesh more, you're in for a rude awakening, because it's never quite as fun as your first time. When you do it the second, third and fifth time and more, it's never quite as fun. So, you end up chasing the dragon, you don't ever crush that dragon, and then you kind of are where you are. So I wish my fellow people could do things in moderation, but we don't know what that word means. We really don't. So it's very unlikely for that to happen. It's very, very, very unlikely for us to have any semblance of moderation. But I do wish we had that ability to do so, because I think it would greatly help us and change things for the better. But hey, here we are.